Today's podcast, we are going to be talking to Alisa DiLorenzo of the One Extraordinary Marriage and Bold Wives Club about experiencing confidence in your body in the bedroom as women, the messages that we received as kids and how it affects our marriage today, and what tools we can use to gain confidence in our homes. I am thrilled to have her on our podcast and ready to dive in. Welcome to the Connection Codes podcast. This is the podcast where we break open our emotions that take us from being disconnected to connected in our relationships and in yourself. I am your host, Tara Wages, and joining me is marriage and family therapist, clinical sexologist, Dr. Glenn Hill, and his incredible wife, Phyllis. Together, they have founded the Connection Codes, which is the guide to human connection, and we're so glad you're here. I could not be more excited to have Alisa DiLorenzo on our podcast.
Yes.
As I mentioned in the intro, she is the host of the One Extraordinary Marriage podcast, along with her husband, Tony, and now the creator of the Bold Wives Club, that is what we're diving into today. But Alisa, I want to tell you, if you don't mind, my story with you and what you have done for me. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I discovered your podcast in 2017 after Wes and I were in a really intense part of our marriage and struggling sexually horribly. It was awful. And I was renovating our house, 1905 house at the time. And so I was there all day by myself, painting, doing sheetrock stuff, doing all the house stuff for weeks. And you were in my ear for hours. I could cry right now. Whew, sorry. For hours and hours, I listened to you and Tony coach me through the sexual pillar of my relationship with Wes. Y'all talk about the 6 pillars of intimacy and the healing that brought me in 2017. It was the first time that I realized I had a man in my home telling me, Tira, sex matters. Sex matters to me. And I was like, oh, but does it really matter that much? I am tired. I've had 3 babies. And then listening to you and Tony share that sex actually really does matter. It really is something in our relationship that we need to hold safety for each other and meet each other there. And I love that y'all talk about you schedule sex so you don't have to worry about when you're going to get some. And it was the first time that I'd ever even heard the concepts that y'all talk about. And so I feel so full circle in this moment to be sitting next to Phyllis, who changed the next chapter of our marriage, and then you, who really helped Wes and I connect in a way that I truly did not know was possible at the time. And so thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Sorry.
Usually it's a little later in the interview that the tears start to come, but wow, you got me right at the beginning.
Well, I remember just listening at the time and thinking, oh, I wonder if I'm ever going to get to talk to them. I wonder if I'll ever get to interact with them. I just felt in my soul it would happen one day.
Yeah.
And today is the day. And I feel just super honored and grateful because Tony and I meet now once a month, and he's helping me even just like with the business part of the Connection Codes as a mentor. And I just really want our listeners to know, if you're listening, like, keep moving forward, work on yourself, work on your marriage, and find yourself in spaces, and you'll meet the people that are impacting you. And so I feel really honored to be able to interview today about what you are doing in the Bold Wives Club and in how you're impacting women and marriages everywhere.
Thank you. Feels very inadequate after what you just shared there, because when that book came out, and it's been about 2 years now, we had no idea. Like, we knew it was our life's work, but we had no idea. And there are so many stories just like yours. And even 2 years later, I am still, every story I hold just like a precious treasure, because our mission is marriage. And it's always been about impacting one marriage. And it's super great to find out whose marriage it was today.
Yes.
And so thank you for sharing that. It's a heart treasure for me. And so Here
Thank
we
you
are. And
so
now I'm
much.
crying already.
Yes.
So next time I'll wear the waterproof mascara at the start of the interview. And
Well, you're not alone. I'm sure we cry a lot on our podcast, actually. Each of us cry, even
We
Dr.
take
Glenn.
turns.
We take
Yeah.
turns, yes. And so, Alisa, I would love to know more about your story and how you got where you are today to creating the One Extraordinary Marriage and then now Bold Wives Club.
yeah, you know, it's crazy to look back. Tony's been using this phrase recently on the podcast, talking about the fact that we've been married for decades. And every time he says that, I'm like, that sounds so long. Can we stop talking about almost 3 decades? Can we pull this in? And we just had, both of our kids just had significant birthdays. One turned 18, one turned 21. So I've been spending a lot of time reflecting, and it's been such a crazy journey. Like I look back and I look at I met Tony 2 weeks before I turned 20. And I look at that young woman now that my kids are about that same age, right around those same ages. And, really remember I was such a rule follower, and I never thought outside the box. And it was just like, put your blinders on and just, whatever the next step is. And so I fell into a lot of things and fell into a lot of patterns because of just observing what I saw in my family growing up. And so just stayed in this really tiny, narrow world. And I see it very much now because I've got my 21-year-old just returned from 9 weeks in Italy, where I'm just going to go for 9 weeks. I'm like, you're like my hero. I wouldn't have had the courage to do that. I'm learning how to be brave from watching my kids and things like that. But Tony and I had a lot of dysfunction in our marriage in the early years. And it stemmed from not knowing how to talk, which is why connection codes and feelings and all of that stuff really matters to this gal.
Yes.
Been a lot of sexual dysfunction, which is why when you talk about the sexual intimacy pillar, that understanding came out of our own struggles. I didn't know how to talk to my husband. I didn't know how to unpack the emotions that I had. And so I spent a lot of my time scared and a lot of time in a place of avoidance. I'm like, man, if we don't talk about it, if I don't think about it, then probably it's not there. Except, as we all know, the things you don't address just become the bigger elephant. And it wasn't until Tony and I were in a really dark place and, we were considering divorce. Our baby was 2 and we're like, okay, well, we've got some options. We can get divorced right now and the kids will be 2 and 5 and they'll grow up in 2 separate homes and we'll figure out how to make that work. We can get divorced when the baby turns 18. Given that she just turned 18 a couple weeks ago, is not lost on me that this could be the year that my marriage would be ending.
Wow.
Or we could get radical. And fortunately, I'm married to a big visionary. And so he threw out a crazy radical idea to put our marriage first by embarking on a sex challenge. You've read the book, that's part of the story. And that's when I started to step into a place of going, okay, what else? What else is out there? What happens when we present our challenge for the first time and somebody says, what's next? And I'm thinking, what's next? Are you kidding? I'm like, wife of the year. I've got the award. And it was in that what's next that really became One Extraordinary Marriage, which has been our life's work for the last 14 years.
Yeah.
And that's been just going after one marriage every day.
And you've now reached thousands and thousands of marriages. One Extraordinary Marriage is one of the top marriage podcasts available. And I also just love that y'all dove right in. I remember listening because it was years ago. And so I go back to the beginning, the early days of listening. And I love knowing a couple, you make the decision, you issue the challenge, and then you're going to dive in, and you went in feet first. And now today you're not shifting your focus, but you're adding an element to the piece of this puzzle that is so needed. And that is talking about confidence in women. And Phyllis and I talk about this often of just how we show up in our own bodies, how we show up in the bedroom, and then also how it looks different for everyone of what even confidence means for each person. That you can't just say, well, go put on lace and go have sex with your husband, because that's not going to be your confidence. Phyllis, you're a leather girl. You feel confident when you're wearing leather, and I love that. It's so sexy. And so I want to know, what types of things steal a wife's confidence? What robs her of confidence?
And this is such a good question, because I think so often we can portray ourselves as being confident. Social media Nowadays, like you just put up the one good picture and everybody's, dang, that girl's now she's killing it. She's got it all together. She's Instagram, all the things. And yet behind that, just straight up with social media, we're wrestling with comparison.
Mm-hmm.
That family looks amazing. That husband's so like doting. Like, look at that trip. Look at all these. And so we're in this comparison trap. And that can be just a wheel that we spin on. We look at ourselves in the mirror, and the body image struggle that women are facing right now is so significant. And I think part of it is social media. We're constantly bombarded with photoshopped images and filters galore. You can't post a picture now without some platform asking, do you want a filter with that? It's kind of like fries. It used to be, do you want fries with that? Now, do you want a filter?
Yeah.
For that picture, we struggle with body image. We struggle with comparison. There are a lot of words that have been spoken over women, literally from childhood. I was talking to a coaching client the other day and hearing things about being told she was fat when she was little.
Yeah.
And just having that kind of, oh my gosh, like no matter what I see in the mirror, no matter what my weight is, no matter how toned I am, I still hear you're fat, you weigh too much, you don't look good in that type of thing. And we bring all of this. Illness, sometimes how we feel about our bodies when it's not working well. There's so many factors, and it is different. Terry, you said this earlier. There's no one size fits all on what robs confidence, but we know that it's there when we don't feel that empowerment when we walk into a relationship, specifically with our husbands.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also cultural. It's interesting. We talk about it on the podcast as well, of how women are even viewed by men growing up, and how our bodies tend to be considered the problem in the room. And Phyllis grew up in Germany, and so you've shared a lot of your experience.
Yeah. No, it's interesting growing up in a different culture, like in Germany, where nudity is not the way it is over here. As far as, I just remember even as a child going to the park, and if it was a beautiful sunny day, which were few and far between, seemed like, it's like everybody was at the park. And of course, women just would have no shirts on to get the most sun. And nobody thought that was inappropriate or gross or anything. Women tended to not wear bras when over there. And so it was just, the body was viewed very differently. Even I remember that big ad poster over deodorant would be a nude woman, and no one was gawking at it. So it was handled very differently, the body. And when I came to the States as a teenager, it all shifted, and I was so aware of how much it shifted over here. And so my girls sometimes ask me, Mom, how did you end up with such good body image? And I said, I think that it was the way I grew up, not knowing anything different. I didn't know until I was a teenager that there was anything else going on over here when it came to the body. It just was approached very differently growing up in Germany. And then, and I think, though, on the flip side of that, I feel like I grew up, though, to be silent. And I think that's been my biggest struggle, even to this day, is to have the confidence to have a voice. And because that is very much, and I don't think it was just in my household growing up in Germany. And I grew up, my parents went over right after World War II. So the war-torn country of Germany. And then I remember even in German schools, one teacher in particular had served in the war. There were still people all around me that had served in the war. And and I just feel like there was a lot of silence, not just by women, there was just a lot of silence. And you didn't speak, you didn't ask questions, people just kind of kept their heads down and moved through life. And that was all around me. And then it worked well in my family as well, in my family of origin. Yeah, just especially, and I think my brothers were silenced too. So that's why it wasn't just the women in my family. We had a large 8 children, and, we were not allowed to speak at the dinner table. So there was just this understanding of silence is best. And so don't speak up, don't say, which you think about that even along with that body image idea, just that maybe I had no voices telling me anything differently, like negative messages about bodies. But then I come to the States, and at this point it's, okay, I got the no negative messages about bodies, but I very much have a be silent. And that I brought into my marriage. Just be silent.
Yeah.
And so that is just, I would say, hand in hand damaging how much that affects us sexually, that I had no clue that I had the ability to speak up and say, this is what I would enjoy, or that did not feel good, or can we try that differently? I had no voice at all.
I'm so glad you're saying that, because that's a totally different type of confidence than what I even think about when I think about confidence. I think about sexual confidence of going into the bedroom and taking my clothes off and those types. But even just being confident in your own self, in your home, and like talking to your husband, that's a totally different layer. That's amazing.
It is. And it's interesting that you say that, because as the two of you are talking, and that ability to speak, that vocal confidence. I'm reminded of a story that was recently posted in the Facebook group for Bold Wives Club, and these wives just stepping into this place. And one of them, she was in a position where she needs to get a job, and she'd been volunteering for a church. And she said, she called her bold light bulb moment, where they were talking about needing someone that had her services. And she's like, I just turned around and said, what about me? And that ability for a woman, for a wife to say, what about me? Like you said, Phyllis, like, this is what I want to ask for in the bedroom, or this is what I want to talk about in the bedroom, or when it comes to our finances or parenting the children, or even a job.
Yeah.
Being able to speak and say, you know what, I'm valuable.
Yeah.
And what I say is important. And I know it, so I'm going to volunteer it. And that is, there are so many layers to confidence and being bold.
And so with that, why does it matter so much? What impact does it make when a woman is confident in herself and in her home versus when she is not?
It literally changes every aspect of the marriage. When there is this deep sense of knowing and of empowerment, it changes the conversations. You know, one of the things that I even stepped into this year was, growing up, I saw my mom avoid conflict very strongly.
Yes.
She would actually remove herself. And so coming into our marriage, I very much have those same conflict avoidant tendencies, to the point where if Tony, like, even just raises his voice, I would look away. And so I stepped into this place this year, partly because of Bold Wives Club, but partly because I knew I needed to work on it myself. And I said, you know what, when he raises his voice, or when he's upset about something, you're going to look him in the eye and you're going to engage in conversation.
Wow. Yeah.
And we were just talking about it as we were recording one of our own podcasts, and it's been different. Because we can finish a conversation. I'm not getting frustrated with you because you've checked out. You're staying in there with me. And these are the types of things that happen when a woman is able to ask for what she wants in the bedroom, or talk about what didn't feel good. Like, our husbands never want to make us feel bad
Right.
in the bedroom. But if we don't tell them what's working or what's not, they're wonderful human beings, but they're not mind readers.
Right.
And it shifts the whole sexual experience when we're able to communicate to them. Like, I've joked, with Bold Wide and other groups over the years, I'm like, there's a big difference. 2 centimeters can be a really big difference between pleasure and it was okay.
Yeah. Wow.
But if he doesn't know that because I haven't shared it, then that's on me. That's not on him. That boldness that shows up when we say, hey, I want to talk to you about our finances. And a woman takes ownership of what's going on, not just, oh, well, I'm going to avoid all talk about money because I don't want to face it, but instead steps into this place that says, I am your partner. I am your teammate. We do this thing called marriage together. It wasn't just like the husband show and the wife gets to be an accessory. It's like, no, we both said, I do. And that doesn't mean that we said I do for the moment. It was I do for a lifetime.
Right.
And that's why it's so important that a woman have confidence, because when she brings that, her husband sees her differently.
Totally.
It's interesting even talking about just that idea of being able to, I love the 2 centimeters. That's awesome. But so much of our education is through television and just the rom-coms, where it all looks so magical. Oh, he walks into the room or she walks into the room. And of course, the room is always this gorgeous room with a gorgeous view, and the music is perfect and the lighting is perfect. And then they just magically intermesh their bodies and have what we're assuming is an incredible orgasm. And there's no conversation there. Nobody is going, hey, just a little over this way, or could you just touch me a little that way? That never happens. And I think for so many of us women, we think we're broken because that scenario doesn't happen in our life, where instead of realizing actually that's not real life, that's just Hollywood, that is not reality, that we actually do have to communicate. We have to show up and say, this is what feels good. This is what I like. This is what I enjoy. And you mentioned the black leather, which kind of was, it's funny that we talk about this on a podcast where who knows how many people will hear this, but that's okay.
You shared a lot more than that.
I know. I have. You're right. But I was definitely raised, not even raised. This was never talked about. It was after I was married that it was just understood what Victoria's Secret stood for was white lace. And back then, and that is where you find your sexy, is just get something from Victoria's Secret and then it'll just magically happen. You'll put that outfit on and you will become this, right. You'll have the confidence and you will just feel sexy. And it had the opposite effect on me, actually. The white lace, I felt more shame in that. I didn't feel comfortable. I felt no confidence in that. But I, again, didn't have a voice to say that. And money was spent on that. So it was like, oh, thank you. And it took years for me to be able to have the voice to say, I don't want to wear that stuff. I don't like it. I don't feel good in it. I don't feel sexy in it at all. And that's when I actually realized it's okay to have a different version. Finding that, I think, is huge. I think that's one of the things we talk about, where it's like, for you, it may be just a mini skirt. Okay, then go after that. Wear that mini skirt to death. Do that thing. Versus it has to be lingerie or that version of lingerie. It's that important of what brings that confidence, where you can wear that, or maybe it's the red lipstick, or it's just something where you go, oh, when I put that on, I think I've got it. And I've got his attention for sure. And I feel great in it. And sometimes though, we hear other messages, the messaging out there, like that's how it was for me. I thought I was supposed to like that, and that there was something wrong with me, that I didn't like the white lace or the particular lingerie that at that time Victoria's Secret was carrying.
Yeah, I remember falling into that trap a little bit as well. And some of it for me was the thought of, I've been taught my whole life to hide my body, to cover my body. And now I just walk into this room and I take off my clothes. Like, what? So on our honeymoon, which I think I've told this story before, we had not had sex prior to marriage. And so I go into the bathroom to put on my sexy outfit while Wes lights the candles and turns on the jazz music and does the whole situation. And then when I emerge out of the bathroom, though, I'm wearing a one piece, think of a toddler PJ outfit with the footies and the polar bears on it. And it's a zipper all the way up, because I just kept thinking, how am I supposed to just walk out of this bathroom in lingerie? And it was a joke. I slid out of the bathroom with my arms in the air, and we laughed about it for a minute. And at the time, it definitely helped break that ice for us, which now I'm like, ooh, Wes, sorry if that was like a painful moment for you. You're envisioning your wife walking out, looking all sexy. But I still had those messaging in my mind of how do you just flip that confidence switch? How do you go from one day not having confidence because you have no experience and you've been told hide your body, to now this very next day, oh, I'm supposed to walk out of here and my boobs are hanging out and you're going to see my butt, like
all the things,
the things. So what do you do to help women build confidence, whether it's in the bedroom or in their communication? Like what can you do to help women?
One of the things I want to say, and I've now raised a son and a daughter. They're legal adults now. But some of it's, as parents, I feel like we have an obligation to actually start framing sexuality, framing what is going to happen on a wedding night, that type of thing early on. Not throw open the doors, hey, you can have sex whenever you want. I still think there's contextual 100%. But if we can start changing the narrative from, oh, you've got to keep your body all covered up, and change that to a place of, this is going to be such a beautiful thing when you and your husband are able to do this, and your husband's going to love to see your body, and start putting that language, because I do think parents, church, school, whoever, very well meaning, trying to avoid premarital sex, all the things, but we haven't given that context of saying, and yet it will be beautiful. And this is something where sharing your body with your husband is incredible. We're just like, yeah, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And now do it.
Right.
And that's this huge mental struggle for us. So that's just a little parenting.
Yeah.
That get dropped in. And it's something that we've done with our own children, where we've talked with both of them about what that's going to look like, and celebrating their bodies, because I do want them to be confident in who they are and how they look, no matter how they look, and that type of thing. But as a woman who didn't get those messages, raised in a church that was like, it was one of those things where I had to learn, I had to explore, I stepped into a place, and this is something I work with a lot of women on, going into what, first of all, identifying what are those words, what are those phrases, what are those messages that you grew up with, and where can we find what was true in them when you were single and maybe a teenager and all the things, and what was there to protect that season of life, and what can we release to being that age, and recognize that wasn't for marriage. That was for all the premarital stuff. What does it look like to, if Victoria's Secret is not your thing, and it's not for a lot of women don't like lace, which is why I'm really glad that all of the manufacturers have gone away from just being lacy. I tell them all the time, what color do you feel good in? You mentioned the red lipstick, Phyllis. I'm like, I love red lipstick.
Yeah.
I think it's fabulous.
Yeah.
But some women love to be in purple, and some women would never wear purple or red or orange. And I'm like, find the color that when you put it on, whether it's a nightgown, whether it's just a great matching set, you can look in the mirror and go, you know what? We look good in this color. It's going to be a good day.
It's going to be a good day.
Talk to your husband about words, because for a lot of women, I discovered this years ago. I was in a coaching session, and I said, what makes you feel sexy? And I watched her face, and I said, I just said the wrong word. Tell me the story behind the word sexy. And it turned out that she had an older sister, and when they were younger, sexy was equated with being promiscuous. And so for her, when I said, what makes you feel sexy? She was, I don't want to be promiscuous. So it's even identifying, do you want your husband to call you beautiful? That you're so attractive. This is what I find desirable about you. But you have to check yourself. Look in the mirror. And what are the parts when you look in the mirror and you're like, girl, that is for sure your best feature. And then tell him. Because he may be talking about another part of your body. And you're like, I don't like that part. That part's a little jiggly, or that part's not as toned as it was before the babies, or all of this kind of stuff. But oh my gosh, if you could just talk about my eyes. And then you equip him, because when he starts speaking those words over you, it's why, and I totally remember this episode number, we're almost to 800 now in podcast episodes, but episode 338 in our catalog is called Beautiful Wife.
Okay. I will link that.
And it's the story of Tony choosing, when we rewrote our intro year 2, it says this, my name is Tony DiLorenzo, your co-host, along with my beautiful wife, Alisa. He reads it every single episode. The word beautiful does not appear in the written intro. He added it the first time. And I just rolled my eyes, because I grew up as the ugly duckling. I had people make fun of me. I wore the glasses and the braces and bad haircuts and all the things. But he knew at that point in time, he literally got a revelation from God that he needed to start calling me beautiful for me to hear it and for him to believe it. Because it was just some of the challenges we'd had in our marriage. All the years later, I am 49 years old. I wear it proudly. I walk past mirrors and I'm like, girl, you are beautiful. Yes. But it was because I allowed him, after much resistance, and I did, to speak that word over me and to change. And that's where, as a woman, it discovers what are the words that resonate with her? What are the colors? What are the fabrics? What are the strengths that she has that people tap into, and they're like, you're the only one, Phyllis, that this is a strength I see in you. Tara, this is a strength, and I'm going to own it.
Yeah.
I'm going to let that empower me, because sometimes when you can't see it yourself, you have to rely on what other people see to move that confidence forward until you walk through it yourself.
It's so good because I'm thinking many of us get messages when we're young. And that's what I'm hearing right now, where some of the listeners have grown up in homes where they were told, do not be vain. You are not to be named beautiful because that would create vanity. And we're not, in and on those messages go. And we can get so lost in that. And there's so much judgment that we put upon ourselves, even because of the messaging. And I have a memory, I don't know, I must have been around 14, the very first time I put some makeup on. And I think my mom was, the way I remember it, she was in Europe that summer. We were already living back in the States. So she went back often and would teach at women's retreats and be the main speaker. And so she was gone for a part of the summer. And I guess first time I came out wearing makeup, and my dad said, "You look like a harlot." And it was like, I can still remember it to this day, all these years later. And it stuck so solid to wear blush. I probably put some blush or rouge on my cheeks. To him was shocking, and you look like a harlot. And I think there are messages that we have heard as young people, as a child, and that we have to figure out that history for ourselves. And just now, Alisa, you mentioned something about the ugly duckling in your family. And it's like that came from somewhere early on. And so the idea of being called beautiful didn't make sense. It went against, what you had been told. And it's like being able to break our messaging down. I think that's really powerful to go, okay, often I say, where did that come from? When we work with couples, it's like, or with just a woman, where did that messaging come from? And often we don't stop long enough to even ask ourselves that. Like, where did you get that from? And it seems it's going backwards that we realize, one time, my dad said I looked like a harlot, one time only. But that stuck. That was back then. You have natural beauty. God gave you natural beauty. So to use makeup was not godly. That's kind of how it was presented. And I had to later in life figure that one out.
Yeah.
I can wear makeup if I want to. Yeah. That's not, it doesn't make me a harlot because I wear blush. So, yeah.
Well, and I was just going to say, sometimes when we have those revelations too, we need to go through the process of releasing and forgiving that person. I know for me, it was a lot of like school stuff where a lot of those names and whatnot came through, and I knew I had to do some work to release those people that had said it, because I know that they weren't intending to be hurtful. And I would assume even in this case with your dad, he's probably was a little shocked that you came out with makeup on. So it surprised him. And your mother was not there to deal with it, because that probably would have been her role had she not been over. And so he's just, I'm shocked. What do I do with this? My daughter's growing up. Like all of these types of things that happen. And the simplest statements that have the most damage fly out of people's mouths.
Yeah.
And yet they get put on repeat in our heads. And so sometimes it's even just doing that business with forgiveness to say, okay, I'm not carrying around what my dad said over me or what those kids said over me anymore. I'm gonna release them. Right. I'm gonna forgive them for it and not let it have power over my life, because that's not mine to carry. And so that I can step into being confident with my husband, being bold in my marriage, doing those types of things. Sometimes we got to do like you said, we have to pause to look backward so that we can accelerate forward.
Absolutely. I love that so much. And it just shows the power of your words. For Tony to be the first one and say it over and over. You've recorded 800 podcasts. And so for the last 500 and some change podcast, he's been saying the word beautiful to you. And so I obviously know he said it more than 500 plus times to you, but you are hearing it on a consistent basis and you believe it now.
Yes.
As you should. You are beautiful. I could cry just telling you that. You are beautiful.
Thank you.
And so our words carry so much weight and so much power. And I love that. I think that's just such an obvious example. There's a moment in the Barbie movie and she sits on the bench and she looks at the older woman sitting next to her and says, "You are beautiful," which is a message that our older generation, this woman I believe was in her 80s, isn't told very often, because as women, we don't just receive the messages when we're young of what beautiful looks like. We receive it during our pregnancy. We receive it during postpartum of how quick did you get your, I'm quoting, body back. And then we continue to receive it through menopause, through aging. And so I love when we can speak life and beauty and the words over each other. I think it impacts us on a very deep level. Lisa, tell me about Bold Wives Club and what you are doing there to help women, and also how women find you, how they even can connect with you to learn more.
So earlier this year, and it feels really weird, this has felt like a very long year, like a short year and a long year all at the same time. Earlier this year, Tony and I started having conversations, and I coach couples, I coach individuals, I've coached a lot of wives over the years. And he just started asking me, what do they all have in common? And there were these themes. There was this deep need for community, right? For having those friendships where you could talk about things like what I talk about. I'm very comfortable talking about sex. We've been doing it for 14 years. I'm very comfortable getting into the weeds in a marriage and a relationship because I've been doing it for the last 10 years as a coach, and really started formulating what would happen if I was able to create a community where women could really take off the masks. In fact, I've joked, we're trying to schedule an event, a live in-person event for next year. I'm like, and we're going to have one morning where no one's allowed to wear makeup, and you're coming in your, like, you got to be fully covered, but you're coming in your jammies.
Yeah.
Because what does it look like if we take off the masks, if we get real about what's going on? I wanted a community where it's not like the husband bashing 101. And I don't tolerate it. Yep. I'm like, this is not about bashing our husbands. This is about saying, hey, this is the challenge. If you've got a problem, this is the challenge my husband and I are facing. I've been married 27 years. We definitely have our issues from time to time. We are not perfect. But it's not because Tony's a jerk or Tony's all messed up. It's, hey, we've got some kind of disconnect. And I need help figuring out what that is.
Oh, hold on. And Alisa, you froze when you were saying that. So can you say it's not because Tony's a jerk? Can you start there?
Yeah. It's not because Tony's a jerk or because he's all messed up. It's about, we have a problem. And bringing women together and their collective wisdom of saying, how do we as wives gather wisdom? Not the latest pundits, not the, oh, you know what, just leave them. Oh, all men are jerks. But to say, wait a minute, I've walked through this. Let me share with you what I've done. And so back in September, I started the Bold Wives Club. I started inviting women to join me in community. We've got women from all over the United States, married anywhere from like 2 years to almost 40 years. And we're getting together twice a month, and we're talking about real things. We're talking about body image. We're talking marriage challenges when you're a sandwich generation. We're talking about what do you do when you're a newlywed and you're still trying to figure out, like, how do we navigate holidays and things like that. And I've brought women together to get real with one another, to be in community, and to be in this place of saying we all want to have an extraordinary marriage, but I can't do it by myself.
Right.
And I want to do it with other women who also want to have extraordinary marriages, not just the ones that are, you know what, if we get to 20 years, we get to 20 years and we'll call it good. So
yeah,
that is the heart of Bold Wives Club.
I love that. And how can people find you?
So you can learn more about Bold Wives Club at boldwivesclub.com. But everything that we do at One Extraordinary Marriage is under oneextraordinarymarriage.com.
I love that so much. And I'm also going to link to we recently shared on our email list your 19 questions in the bedroom. And so that's a free download that people can access to go ahead and get plugged into the One Extraordinary Marriage and learn more about what all they do, as well as the Bold Wives Club.
Thank you for sharing.
So we wrap up our podcast by doing our tool, the core emotion wheel. And one of the things that was firing for me earlier as you were sharing was so much of what we're experiencing in our lack of confidence has to do with the emotion that's firing in our body. And so when we want our husband to go 2 centimeters different, are we experiencing shame in that moment? Are we experiencing fear in that moment? What is it that is holding us back? And that's why I love that what you teach adds that logistical level to, okay, let's process that emotion. And now let's use our voice. Let's actually step in and find the confidence and change our lives and change our marriage. So I'm going to share, I'll go first. And then Alisa, do you mind doing it as well? Okay.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I like doing it when we talk about sex because I still struggle. I'm not completely to the other side yet, which I am night and day different than where I was in 2017. I have anger because of the messaging that I received that my body was bad and that I needed to, I don't know, that it was my responsibility for every other man on earth.
Wow.
I feel shame that our marriage struggled sexually for so long when I had a husband asking and at times begging me to make a shift.
Wow.
I feel shame that I did not tune into him better. I feel guilt. Oh, the guilt that's firing for me right now is for sliding out of the bathroom in a polar bear outfit on our honeymoon.
I get that.
Because we talked a lot about how that first night, your honeymoon, there's so many disconnects that happened and that it could have impacted us. I feel fear of not knowing what messages I'm even sending my kids unintentionally. If there is something that I could have said previously or even will in the future that they'll tuck in their brain and not know. I feel lonely. I feel lonely, I think, in being one of the few people doing this type of work. Like, our community is amazing, but not everyone is on board with teaching their kids about sex early or having these types of conversations. And sometimes I feel like I have three heads, or even around good friends. And so I feel lonely in that. I feel sad that women, and I know men receive their own messages, but that this is women's story. It's not just the three of our story, but it's millions of women's story, and it's impacting their marriage in a way that is just detrimental even. And so I feel sadness that we carry that. And I feel hurt. Right now I'm feeling hurt because I'm also thinking of the specific moments of the things that were said to me in middle school and high school by men specifically about my body. And I feel really hurt about that. And I feel joy. I feel joy because there are people out there, Phyllis Hill and Alisa DiLorenzo, that are sharing these messages and that are helping women learn to communicate and find the confidence. And it has changed my life 180 dramatically. And I feel so much joy in that. So thank you.
Fun.
Okay.
Wow.
That's powerful. Okay, so this is my first time going around the wheel. So
I'm excited.
Okay, I feel anger. I feel anger that it's taken so long for this type of education to be accepted, that there are generations that are still struggling through this, because we can talk about sex in so many different ways, but when it comes to talking about healthy sex in a marriage, nobody wants to talk about it, and that makes me angry. That happens. I feel shame for, like you, Tara, all the years that, similar story, all the years that Tony wanted our sexual intimacy to be really strong, and I was just, you just want sex. And that was and I guess that there's also a feeling of guilt wrapped around that. I didn't understand that sexual intimacy was actually a pillar of marriage until it got really dysfunctional in our marriage, and we knew we had to do something different. Fear. I live every day in the fear that there's a marriage that needs hope and we can't get to that.
Wow.
That there will be a marriage that, a couple that decides to end their marriage because they didn't get a book or they didn't get a podcast or somebody didn't say, hey, do you know about this resource? Do you know about the connection codes? Like, the people that are doing the marriage work, I live in this fear of, oh my gosh, one more couple. One more couple. I feel lonely. I felt lonely. There are still times when I feel it because Tony and I do work on our marriage so hard. And when you're a wife that works on her marriage, you can feel like you've got three heads when other people are like, just give it a rest already. Well, this is the way it's supposed to be after 25 years.
Yeah.
Just, it's okay to be roommates. And that's a very lonely feeling. I feel sad. I grieve for the marriages that I work with that don't survive. And there's a sadness to seeing those circumstances that one person or another, it was too much. There's a sadness that they didn't take action earlier. I feel hurt. I'm still working through those childhood name calling and all of those types of things, because I think the things that you hear as a child, they come off in layers.
Yeah.
They go on in a moment, they come off in layers. And so I still work through that. I feel joy spending this time with the two of you. This was literally from the first moment to right now. This interview has been a gift to me, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful, Tara, for your story. Phyllis, I'm grateful for all the stories that you shared and just the vulnerability. That level of vulnerability brings me so much joy, because that's very much when I talk about women being in community, it's being able to share those stories and be real and talk about all of the things that we've heard and experienced so that we are actually stronger together.
I love that so much. Yeah, thank you for sharing. This tool helps people to identify what those emotions feel like inside their body. So then when they're having that moment with their partner in their home and they realize, ooh, I have something I want to say, but I don't have the confidence to say it. What's happening in your body? And then they can train themselves to know what it feels like. Because the lack of confidence in your home is a very lonely experience. You are now storing everything by yourself. And we don't want people living in loneliness. We don't want women living in loneliness, and husbands. And so these tools together, the core emotion wheel and the 6 pillars of intimacy, having bold wives in your home to show up. I love that so much. So I'm going to leave in the show notes all of the ways to connect with Alisa, and I'll link the podcast that you had mentioned. And I just thank you so much for coming on today. I do have one more question about the Bold Wives Club. Is it open all the time, or do you have cohorts of times that people can come in?
So as it had launched in September, I was doing cohorts just to get everybody's feet wet. Starting in Q1 of 2024, we will be keeping it open so that women, as they hear about it, can come in, because I want to get women emboldened, and I want that to happen as quickly as possible. And so to get women in community is really the number one thing.
I love that so much. So if you're listening and you're a lady like, I need this and I need it today, it's open today. And so thank you for being here. Yep.
Thank you so much.
We do.
Thank you both.
All
it
of
was
this.
A true honor.
Oh, thank you. We do all of this because Glenn's not here now to do his part. So am I going to do Glenn's part?
I guess so.
Okay. I feel, let me step into Dr. Glenn. We usually have Dr. Glenn on our podcast if this is your first time listening. And so I'm going to be him for a moment.
Yeah, there you go.
I usually say, we do this because you need
You deserve this.
So let's do this.
Let's do this.